Since its release in 2015, the Scrambler has become the best-selling Ducati model. After selling more than 55,000 units since 2015, the Scrambler finally gets a refresh with several small improvements. Originally developed for the US market in the 1960s, the Scrambler has been on and off the Ducati lineup. In 2015, it came back with a revival of retro-style bikes, especially targeting the new riders. Powered by an 803cc L-twin air-cooled engine, the bike produces a respectable 74 horsepower at 8,250 RPM and a massive torque of 68 Newton meters at a very low 5,750 RPM. Despite being an all-metal bike, Ducati has managed to give the Scrambler 186 kilograms of curb weight by using a trellis frame, lighter aluminum bodywork, and keeping a minimalist design. The power-to-weight ratio is impressive and way over its rival, the Triumph Street Twin, with which we will also compare it. The 41mm USD forks from Kayaba up front have quite a lot of travel in them, much like an ADV bike, but the rear preload adjustable Kayaba monoshock is set up like a naked bike. Braking duties are taken care of by a 330mm Brembo huge single disc with 4-piston calipers up front and a 245mm single disc at the rear. The bike gets an IMU powered cornering ABS in 2019, and it's the major update to its electronics package. Ducati doesn't compromise on tire sizes, and the dual-purpose tires from Pirelli are gripping, and the rear tire is quite wide at 180mm. If you look at the new bike, it doesn't really look that much different from the previous motorcycle. So let's take a look at the differences from the previous model. The new bike produces same power and torque figures, but have been met with the Euro 4 emission norms. While they were doing that, they remapped the bike to a more refined and smoother power delivery. Some components on the front fork by Kayaba were also changed. The rear suspension is now doubly stiffened, and I think I felt that in the handling. In the console, there is a welcome addition of a fuel gauge and a gear position indicator. Since this bike is being targeted to new riders, I think at least having a fuel gauge is a basic necessity. The seat is slightly wider and flatter, and one of the most comfortable that I've ever sat on, and there is a decent room for a passenger as well. The tank side panels are curved now, which is better than the previous bike's flat panels, as it offers a better place to keep the knees while cornering. In cosmetic changes, they have blackened out the engine. The exhaust remains the same, but the heat shield design has been changed. The indicators are now LED, and they are also self-canceling, which means that if you activate them before a turn, they will sense the turn and automatically turn off after that. I have tested it out and it works most of the times. But does it feel that much different to ride? Let's find out.
Thanks to Ducati Mohan Motors Kolkata for providing us the 2019 Scrambler Icon for a full on and off-road test. So if you want to book this motorcycle, the numbers are on your screen. This is a demo unit, so you can get a test drive if you don't believe my review and you want to check it out for yourself. You won't be disappointed. Call the numbers on screen.
The Ducati initially surprised me with its agility. Early morning, we had fun putting the motorcycle through its paces, and it was always eager to dive into the corners. However, the front suspension is quite soft, so braking hard into the corner entry, there's a significant dive on the front end. This doesn't help in setting up the bike, so you have to do your braking a bit early. Once you have achieved your entry speed, however, it's all sport bike from there. The mid-corner stability is immense, and you can open the throttle pretty early coming out of the corner. Despite not having a traction control, the motorcycle remains extremely stable and provides a great amount of feel from its rear end. The Scrambler is immensely good in tight turns in the city, and even on U-turns you can twist the handlebars a lot and get a tight U-turn done, which is very friendly for beginner riders. However, on the long sweeping corners is where the motorcycle really comes out as a beast. Pinning the throttle at 155 km per hour hanging off from the bike, the Scrambler screamed through the secluded patch of tarmac. Its trellis frame is stiff and the rear end is providing so much traction that not for one moment you feel that you're losing control. The front end on the other hand is not as stiff as a sport bike, and if the tarmac is bumpy then the front does move around a fair bit in corners, but on well-laid tarmac it is as good as a naked bike. The raised handlebars are different than the low flat bars on typical naked bikes, but it doesn't take away from the handling. On the other hand, the really wide bars are excellent for precision inputs. I had a lot of fun riding this bike and ripping through the corners. So how fast is it off the line? Even I was curious. Those numbers are solid, and the bike can get up to 100 km per hour only on the second gear itself, and it was time for the top speed test. In the limited space, we got to over 193 km per hour, and the motorcycle is capable of speeds of over 210 km per hour. In the high speed, the front kind of wobbles a bit with the upshifts, and that's due to the suspension, but it's always under control and the bike is always stable. There is a strong and nerve-wracking wind blast after about, I'd say, 160 km per hour. If you want to tour on this bike, invest on a windscreen. The Ducati Scrambler is one of the most comfortable motorcycles that I've sat on. The seat provides ample support, the handlebars are pretty wide and raised for an upright sitting position, and the foot pegs are slightly rear set, just the way I like it. The posture is comfortable enough for all-day riding, and the 790mm of seat height means even the shortest riders can put both feet down completely. Ducatis have been known to have slight vibrations. Year after year, they keep smoothing it out. The current bike has a slight vibe on the foot pegs, and while you're out there on the middle of the action, you won't really feel it, but when you're cruising at a relatively slower pace, you might feel the slight vibes. Speaking of cruising, on 6th gear, cruising at 130 to 140 km per hour on the highway doesn't seem difficult at all and doesn't stress out the engine on the Scrambler Icon. And if your tours take you to some remote location, it can handle the bad roads or even the lack of it.
First time testing out on some grass and some, I wouldn't say dirt because it's been raining and the dirt's been converted to mostly solid mud. So that's why the trails are kind of easy now. It isn't the wet slush mud because today has been mostly dry, and that's why now we are going into some real grass. It's not really like rocks and slush and mud, but it'll do. The desert sled has a slower uptake on the first few degrees of throttle turn. This is not there with this bike, so you have to be a little bit careful when you're opening up the throttle on dirt. Whoa! This is no X-Pulse, man. There's a lot of power. Bike jumped up. Have to be careful with the throttle here. First gear is fine for me. Welcoming sight of cows. It won't be India without them. I hope I don't slip on some dung. So sitting on the bike, not really standing up. Now the terrain is pretty tough, rough I mean. With its alloy wheels and stuff is okay as an off-roader. Now if you really want to take it regularly off-road and do that sort of stuff, you can go for the classic. I still think they have that variant, and this probably has the most amount of variants in a Ducati motorcycle. Apart from being the most popular model by sales figures, over 55,000 units sold, it is also the most customized bike. They say that people who buy Scramblers have no parts which are stock on the bike after a while.
The stock foot pegs are too slippery for me to stand up on this bike, and I guess if you want to stand up and ride off-road regularly, you should get some aftermarket foot pegs. Ducati doesn't want this Scrambler Icon to be a hardcore off-roader because they have the desert sled for that, but if you're the explorer type, this bike will take you to the toughest of terrains with ease. The most interesting bit is the 790mm of low seat height. My friend Shobik, who is 5 feet 5 inches, can get both feet down easily. At the same time, the bike offers a high ground clearance of 180mm. For shorter riders, riding an adventure bike is out of question, but with this type of motorcycles, even they can dream of off-road touring. Ducati markets the Scrambler as the land of joy, but beyond the tons of customization options and the pop culture ads lies a very practical motorcycle. A comfortable and easy to ride motorcycle that still offers serious enjoyment for the experienced rider despite not being out of reach for the beginner. Multistrada is Ducati's multiple purpose bike, a motorcycle for all streets and even riding off tarmac. The Scrambler is a mini Multistrada to me, a bike that can corner, make your daily commute to work something to look forward to, take that dream trip to Ladakh, and if you get stuck in gravel, you're pulling out a light 186 kilograms of motorcycle and not a 230 kg one as in the Multistrada. For slim riders like me, that makes a world of difference. Just a couple of downsides before we get to the conclusion. It gets air-cooled engine, and that is tough for conditions like India, where summer and traffic can provide a frying pan experience. The fuel tank is just 13.5 liters, even with a very nice 20 kilometers per liter mileage. That range is about 270 kilometers, something that would mean frequent fuel stops on the highway.
So we've been riding the new Ducati Scrambler Icon 2019 edition, and this is the new Atomic Tangerine colorway. I think there's a lot of colorways available. This is the way to go with me. Maybe because I own a KTM, but maybe not. So we started the ride early morning within the city. There wasn't much traffic, but we had to go through a lot of corners. So initially I was a little bit uncomfortable because the bike has a softer suspension up front, and what that does is if you brake really hard, the front end dives in, so you have to be easy with your corner entries, and after that your mid corner stability and out of the corner acceleration is pretty good. But in the city you don't really feel it. It's a very flickable bike. You don't really feel the 186 kilograms of curb weight. Feels much more lighter than that. Ducati kind of talks about this bike as the beginner bike. At 74 horsepower, that's gonna be a handful for beginners. Let me be honest with that. And the Ducati has a lot of low-end torque. It's delivering 68 Newton meters, which is a huge number. What that means is the moment you open the throttle, there's a ton of torque that's available, and that's pretty scary, to be very honest. And it's fun once you get a little bit more experience. For beginner riders, I would say have to take it easy with the motorcycle. Let's compare it with some of the competition bikes like the Triumph's Street Twin, which is their entry-level motorcycle. When you look at the electronics part, Ducati has the IMU powered cornering ABS, whereas Triumph has a normal ABS. But whereas the Triumph has power modes, which makes it even more beginner friendly, the Ducati doesn't have that. So it's always 75 horses at your twist of throttle. Speaking of the throttle, they have made changes to the throttle input. They have remapped the bike to suit Euro 4, and while they were doing that, they also made it more refined, and they made the power delivery less snatchier. We don't think of it as an inline 4 motorcycle. Grunt is still there. It's just that it's being delivered in a little bit smoother way. Like when you cut off the power using engine braking, the engine braking is still very strong, but it's not very abrupt. So that way the motorcycle, in its dynamics, the on and off throttle transitions, they have become much smoother. Now if you're talking about Triumph, whether you should go for that bike, the Street Twin, it has a more retro look. They go with the authentic retro, but the negative of that is they use dual shocks at the rear, sometimes with cartridge kits, and the rear tire is 160, whereas here they have a preload adjustable Kayaba monoshock and a 180 rear section tire, which looks like a modern bike. Doesn't look like back in the 60s, but it creates a really good feel in the handling. Now if you're more of a sporty rider, you can go for the 797, which is Ducati's other beginner bike with the same 75 horses, 75 PS of power, 74 horses. Now that bike has a stiffer front suspension. It doesn't do that well in the off-road, not really regarded for touring, but that bike has a much better handling. And the main key difference I would find is that bike has dual front disc, which makes the bike gain immense in braking, whereas this bike is more about progressive braking performance. I've braked down from 155 kilometers per hour. Trust me, it's no joke. But that bike, you know, you ride it, you feel there is a lot of initial braking coming in, and then there's the progressive, whereas here it's more progressive in a way that this braking is more beginner friendly, but some beginners might want to have extra stopping power, and I can't stop them for that. Now speed and finish wise, comparing it with the Triumph, both the motorcycle brands are extremely good. I would call it a tie. Comparing with what the new parts are, you've seen a host of cosmetic changes, which makes this bike look even bigger, slightly menacing, and similar to the Scrambler 1100. So they have made the ergonomics better. Two things that helped me during the cornering: this newly designed curved tank covering element, which is helping the knee go in and grip with the bike while I'm cornering. And the second thing that's really helpful is the seat. It's wider, it's flatter, it's way more comfortable. It's gonna be coming in really handy in those long tours. Overall, really impressed with the Ducati 2019 Scrambler Icon, and I definitely ask you to go ahead, check this motorcycle out, take a test drive. There's a demo bike available in Ducati Kolkata. Their numbers are given. They definitely give you a test drive. After you ride it, you know, this is gonna be your mini multi-strada. This is gonna do like a lightweight motorcycle that's gonna do on and off-road for you guys. Gonna be good motorcycle for tour. Just add a tall windscreen and some luggage. So definitely recommend you to check this motorcycle out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you very soon on my next review. This is Rahul. Goodbye.